Hello everyone and welcome aboard. Today we have another boat review video for you. After a long hiatus, I'm back with another review video. And before we get started on this beautiful Carver C40, I just want to mention that if you have a boat in the Southern California area, please shoot me an email. I cannot make these videos without the generosity of the community. This one was lent to me by Newport Yacht Rentals. If you are in the SoCal area and looking to charter a yacht, be sure to check them out. Their link is in the description below. They have this one as well as many others that I think will give you a great experience on the water. So without further ado, let's jump into this Carver C40. This Carver is 40 feet in length with a 13-foot 10-inch beam, and it is unfortunately one of the last ones ever made. Yep, in 2021, Marquis and Larson had to shut down the Carver line, making this 2020 one of the last boats to roll off the production. However, before Carver was shut down, it did get a brand new redesign, one which I think greatly improved the look of the boat. I mean, just look at this little raised bow section right here. Let's go take a look at this exterior and this bow that I'm talking about. First off, we have windows stretching the length of the boat. However, I don't know if you can see from the outside, but I'll show you when you go inside. Only a couple of them are actually windows. They aren't full-size windows, which is nice because it keeps the structural rigidity of the hull intact. And then, as we move to the bow, something you'll notice is how steep it is, the angle. This Meridian behind me, sloped. This one, sloped. All these other boats around, sloped. Whereas this Carver has a very steep bow, which is something that boats have been doing a lot more recently, and it depends on how you want them to handle in the water, but for the most part they do it so they can maximize space on the interior. If you look down the side here, you see that there's absolutely no flare. It is just entirely made to maximize interior space. As we move down the side of the boat, you can see where the bow comes down and levels out, which I think gives the boat some great lines. And then as we get to the swim step here in the back, the first thing you'll notice is that it's all gator stepped, or it has this faux teak across the whole deck, which is nice. Feels good on the feet. It's a little warm right now. And then the next thing you see is the wood table in the cockpit, as well as gray cushions to match the gray deck all around the boat. And the sun just came out, so these cushions have been sitting in the sun for a minute now. And while they're not scalding hot, they are a bit warm. Cushion color does affect the temperature of all your seats. As we get into the rear cockpit here, on the starboard side, there is a grill and a small sink. Underneath the small sink and grill, we have a ice maker. And on this side, behind the little stainless door we have here that says Carver, we have a trash area. Now, moving forward up onto the bow, we have walkways down the side with handrails. It's not too difficult. We have a big bow cushion up here that covers the entire length of the bow, as well as a hatch up front with enough storage for a little lily pad, as you can see. The anchor has an anchor locker, as well as an electric windlass. Inside the anchor locker, we have storage for a chain, and there's also a freshwater washdown hose right there. Your controls for the anchor are back here, and you have a nice stainless spotlight on the very front of the rail. I personally really like this bow design because I like how big the pad is. I mean, you could have probably 6 people laying across up here, no problem whatsoever. The pad is the same color as the rest of the cushions on the boat, and as you can see, it's got cup holders laced around it. And then as we head towards the back of the boat, we'll jump up there and check out the flybridge. The flybridge has a nice wide staircase, in my opinion, very wide for this size boat. And when you get up here, you can see it's pretty well designed for the operator. I mean, there's a huge captain's chair here. There's also a second one next to it. And it is completely enclosed with isinglass. I don't believe the boat came this way. I believe they added that. Before it was enclosed in isinglass, it had this neat little wind reflector that came up off these mounting points here and diffused more wind that came over the boat to help protect the occupants of the flybridge. If we look to see what the amenities are up here, we have a nice big wraparound couch, cup holders, and another sun pad on the rear fly that you can lay out in. There is also a small isotherm down here for ice and drinks. The technology on the boat is all Garmin. There are dual displays up here on the flybridge, as well as one large Mercury Cummins display. On top of the displays, this boat has a Cummins joystick system, which helps power the V-drives. As for other equipment at the helm, there is a Garmin autopilot system. The throttle's right here. Horns, blowers, all your controls down here, as well as trim tabs and control of your spotlight. We also have USB charging in there, and windlass controls. It does appear that you are also able to switch what side fuel tank you want to be running from right here as well. Being able to choose which fuel tank you run off of is a very interesting feature in a modern boat. Most boats have their fuel tanks connected now, and I actually don't mind being able to select whichever fuel you want to run out of. Maybe your boat's listing and you want to use more fuel on one side or the other. However, you got to be careful that you don't forget to flip that switch and accidentally run out of fuel. Heading back down the big staircase now, we will go into the interior. Now, the first thing you notice when you enter the interior is how open and spacious it is, but before you even get to that, you notice the big double swinging doors, which both open outward. Now, normally I'm used to doors either sliding and then there being like a half door over here on this side, or maybe they fold over but they both fold onto the same side. So seeing two doors that swing outward is fairly unique, and from the interior, when you're looking out, I think it looks pretty nice. I like it, not having like half a glass door on one side. However, when you're outside, they do appear to be a little cumbersome. Going up the flybridge on this side isn't so bad. However, you can see that it does overlap a little bit on the port side of the boat. These things also do have polarized glass through them. They're just covered for privacy. Now, as we enter the boat, we have a little dinette here on the starboard side. On the port side, we have our little kitchenette, which has a separated sink, a freezer with ice, as well as a refrigerator on this side. We have a Cuisinart microwave, a stove, and we have a small TV over here with a couch, which is nice because if you want to sit facing people that you want to have a conversation with, you're able to do so. On the starboard side, right when you enter, you'll find all your light switches, and then the DC control panel, but only the DC control panel. The AC control panel we'll get to in a moment. And this has all of your standard electronics. As we go back forward on the port side in front of the kitchenette, we have our AC panel. And then above that, we have a Bluetooth and audio system for the televisions, and then the stereo system, which is a JL audio stereo system for the boat. Now, as we head over to the starboard side, we get to the lower helm. And I really like this lower helm because it has a very large bench seat across it, which is great for your wife or your girlfriend or your sugar daddy or your side, or in my case, covers, if you're on your own. Up here, we have a large single Garmin GPS system, as well as another Mercury Marine Cummins engine computer. We have our joystick over here on this side now, behind the wheel, instead of off to our right. And then the rest of the controls are the same as above. I like this helm. I know that I left the cover on here for the sun. I do think that it has probably about as much visibility as any other boat, especially some express boats that don't have flybridges. There's really no visibility. One last thing here in the main salon that I'd like to point out, which are more practical and mechanical features rather than comfort features, is under this section of the kitchen here, we have storage. And it actually has a little staircase to get down into the storage, which I think is nice. Keeping up with that trend of practicality and maybe even a little bit of safety, on this side, we have a deck hatch that has both of your fuel tanks attached to it. And we have all of our fuel shutoffs, which are really easy to reach, especially if you're driving from the lower helm. So those are in a great position to turn off. Now let's head down into the sleeping quarters of the Carver. Fun little quirk before we go into this room is that the hinge to keep it from hitting the other door is actually on the outside of it, which I've never seen before, but it's kind of fun and useful. Then as we enter, we have a twin bed setup over here on the starboard side of the vessel, which also has these cushions in the center if you wanted to just make it a big queen. We have a closet over here on this side, and then as we snake through the vessel, we have access to the day head. The one thing that I think is really neat about this day head, which took me a minute to figure out, is it's clearly a shower, but there's no shower head. So I looked around for it, and it is right here next to the sink. You pull it out, you put it on the shower head holder right here, and then you turn it on. Oh. All right, moving on. We have the big V-berth up in the bow. And you can see here how much space this thing has, since the bow of the boat has very little flare and how wide it stays the whole way through. And it gives you a pretty nice sized master suite. Both sides, closets. This side, starboard, also a television. And then they have their own head over here off to the side. And this time it has its own shower so that a certain YouTube boat reviewer can't accidentally spray himself. So with that, we have reached the entire interior of the boat, which means that there's only one thing left to do, which is to talk about the engines and do the Christian test, which I haven't done in a while. So we'll see how it goes on this one. I haven't even looked in the engine room yet. The engine room hatch is located right here. There we go. Actually not so bad. I kind of like to see this diamond plate down here because it means that there's a good area for you to stand on and hang out on. However, it goes up to about my cell phone, which means that it's not very big. Christian test time. Now, this is the engine room, and you can actually see where those fuel shutoff valves from the salon hatch are right up there. It does show that the firewall, though, is actually under the salon somewhere. We've got a little water pump keeping the pressure after I just hose myself off in the shower on accident. Moving on to the engines, these are Cummins QSB 6.7s that put out 380 horsepower each. They are set up on a V-drive, which means that the front of the engine is actually facing the stern of the boat, and then the transmission back here drops down and brings the prop shaft down below the engines back out in the other direction. Now, this is a very common setup for vessels because it saves a lot of space in the engine room. And as you can see, you're able to keep the engines farther back in the vessel because you don't have to have them straight shafted all the way back out, because by the time the shaft gets to here, it's already out the boat. We have a bunch of manual switches here, a Kohler 11 kilowatt generator, and I think it's a pretty well wired and set up little engine room in here. It's not very tall. I'm guessing that there's stuff underneath me, probably more batteries, but it's all bolted down, so I'm unable to pick it up and look. Or am I? Let's find out. Oh yeah, I can get it up. The deck hatches, that is. At this part of the Christian test, I am supposed to wiggle my way behind one of these engines. And I want to do it for you guys, I really do. But I can already see that on some sides of it, we have tanks for water. So I don't know how I'm supposed to get outboard of the port side. Outboard of the starboard side doesn't have a water heater, and I can get back here. However, it's full of batteries. I don't really want to lay across a bunch of batteries today, attach them in series with my body on accident. I'm probably not going to crawl back there, but you can see on this side, there's a decent amount of space on the starboard side. On the port side, there is very little space. So with that, let's crawl out of this engine room and let's go do the stars. All right, let's see if this works with my little makeshift LaCroix box tripod here. All right, there we go. Now, let's go over the stars to this vessel, and before we do, I just want to review a few things and give a brief description of the entire boat, make sure I got everything that I may have missed earlier. The boat is a 2020 Carver C40. It is a command bridge. It has a 40-foot overall length, a 13-foot 10-inch beam. It has twin QSB 6.7 380 horsepower V-drive engines that bring the boat up to a top speed of 30 knots. It has a advertised cruising speed of 26 knots, which is pretty close to its top speed, so I'm not sure if you really want to cruise at 26, but they say you can. And then it is made out of fiberglass. It has a couple fuel tanks as well as a couple water tanks. The fuel tanks have a total of 342 gallons. The water tanks have a total of 110 gallons. And the holding tank has a limit of 70 gallons with all Garmin electronics, JL audio, stereo systems, mixed with Fusion speakers in some places, a couple TVs, 2 berths, 2 heads, a salon, and a couple sun pads. So really everything you would need in a vessel of this size, this Carver has it. Now, let's go on to those stars, starting with performance. This boat has a top speed of 30 knots, which I think is very good for a 40-foot vessel. Nowadays, that's sort of in par with the performance of other vessels of this size. For performance, I will give it a 6-star rating. Before I continue with the star program, I just forgot that I needed to remind you guys that the star rating system has changed. I know. Previously, the star rating system was out of 5 stars for every category, and there was a total of 10 categories. In this instance, it is now the opposite. There are 5 categories with a total of 10 stars, and the reason for this is to try to get a little more diversity between the ending of the ratings in the star total system. I know that sounded like a bunch of rambling nonsense. My point being, a lot of the boats in the old rating system were very close to each other in rating, because since there were so many categories, the average just brought them all closer. Trying to prevent that now with a higher differential and lesser categories. That has already been updated over on the JakeSea.com website. If you would like to go check out what the other boats have done, you can go see it over there in the ranking section. And they have been updated to the new system we're now going to use moving forward. Now that I brought that up, the ratings are out of 10. It is not a high school equivalency test where if you get 70, you are passing. The average of 10 is 5. So if I think the boat is average compared to other vessels, it will get a 5. If I think it is doing really well compared to other vessels and it is above average, it will get like a 7. And if it is exceptional to other vessels, it will get a 10. That cleared up. Performance, I give it 6 stars out of 10. I think that it is above average for performance for this size vessel. As far as comfort goes, I think this boat is very comfortable. I think that it has a lot of interior space for its size, and I would give it another 6 out of 10 for comfort. I would probably give it a little more than a 6 out of 10 for comfort, because I do actually really like the layout of it. I think it's very spacious and it doesn't feel all that cramped. I do think that the gray seats might have been a bad choice in color. I don't think that that's necessarily the boat's fault. I just think that whoever picked the color of the seats picked a gray, which gets really hot. So for that reason, I'm gonna give it 6, another 6. Moving on to quality, I think this boat is built fairly well. I think that it is built up to the standards that all the other boats are built for. Carver used to be an incredibly popular brand and had a fairly decent reputation for boat building. I don't think that this boat shows any signs of a company that was about to shut down when it was built. Usually that's the case. I think quality is good. I'm gonna give it quality another 6. I think it's above average. Now to practicality. I think that this boat might get the most stars in this category. I think that it's incredibly practical. I think that it has a lot of space available in it. I think that if you're somebody who is either single or with a small family, the twin bunks are perfectly acceptable, and they turn into a queen if you need it to turn into a queen. And the forward V-berth is also just everything you would expect in a boat. Comfortable, has its own bathroom, which is super nice. So for that reason, I give practicality a 7. And finally, our last category for the new system is value. I know I just said that practicality might get the best star rating, but I actually think it might be value, now that I think about it, because this boat has a great value. This boat is a 2020, essentially brand new boat. 40 feet with a fly bridge, twin engines, diesels, low hours, full salon, swinging doors, modern look. You get the picture. You could pick these things up for $500,000 to $600,000. Other boats in this category, like Prestiges, for example, and I mean Sunseekers are just another level, but Prestiges, vessels of the same size, can go for around $1 million. And I think that makes it an incredible value for a boat this size that has all the amenities it has, which are the same amenities that any other 40-foot vessel has. So for that reason, I give its value an 8 out of 10. So with that, I give the Carver a total of 33 stars, which I think is excellent because it is above average in every category. It is above average in performance, quality, comfort, and then it is well above average in practicality and value. So for that reason, I think that this boat has an excellent boat for anyone who's considering looking into getting a Carver. I think it does a great job, and it's sad that they're no longer making them. But with that, this review is completed. If you enjoyed it, be sure to subscribe, like it, turn on the bell notifications, do all the YouTube stuff. And if you want to see the rankings for this boat as well as all the other vessels that I've done so far, check out JakeSea.com. There's also merchandise like t-shirts and other things that help support me.
Nice.
So I appreciate it, and smooth sailing.